Welcome everyone to the After School Special. My name is Allison, and today we have Laura Simpson joining us. Laura is the CEO and co-founder of Side Door, an online booking platform which matches artists with hosts and spaces for live events. So why don't you tell me a bit about yourself before we get into Side Door and how you got started in music and got to where you are now?
Oh, sure. So I guess I started as a music fan like everybody else did. I think the most often question I get asked is, am I an artist myself? And no. I think people must think, you're in the industry, you must be an artist. I do know how to play some instruments and, was in choir and all that, but I am coming at this from a fan and as a supporter first and foremost, and I worked as a journalist for 7 years and started in the entertainment journalism world, and then left that and kind of got lost in political and crime reporting for a long time, and then was like, wait a second, this isn't what I wanted to be doing. And then I kind of veered back and worked at a nonprofit. I worked at Music Nova Scotia for 7 years. So I ended up doing export development with them and ran their funding program and worked a lot with artists and, beyond just being a fan. And I also started hosting shows at my own house. And, all of that led to understanding what it might be like for an artist to try to navigate the world of trying to make a living really out of doing what they love. And I saw a lot of gaps and a lot of things that maybe I could help with. And so that's sort of where the impetus for Side Door came from.
Nice. And you started that with Dan Mangan in 2016, right?
So yeah, we met actually at the right at the beginning of 2016, and we founded the company in 2017. It took a while for us to sort of, we had just met. I had knew of him, of course, as an artist, and he and I worked on a project he had going, which is booking house concerts for artists on his sub label. And so I kind of tried to look at that. And at that point, it was kind of a spreadsheet and like student working on commission. And it was working, but it was just sort of held together by a few pieces. And so I was really interested in the technology play for this, of how to use technology to make it a little bit more simple. And so we started to look at really making a go of it. And that's when we founded it in 2017 and started getting into the world of startup, which was a brand new thing.
And so how was that when it first started? How did people respond to it?
I would say it was a lot of human computering at the beginning. So making things sort of do what we wanted it to do on the surface, but there was a lot of us running around in the background still doing a lot of handmade stuff, booking shows, calling hosts, making sure that artists had what they needed. And it was a really gratifying response actually from artists who had trouble booking traditional venues and were looking for spaces often in between those traditional venues while on tour. It was a huge learning curve. And in a lot of ways, Dan as an artist was the guinea pig for some of these things. But yeah, it was extremely gratifying to start to see where we could make some magic with the artists and hosts at these places and the audience, because even, we didn't invent the house concert, but when people would attend, it would often be their first experience. And just being in an intimate environment in somebody's personal space is a pretty unique thing. And so we were happy to bring that experience to lots of people.
Definitely. And I was reading another article, I think it was an interview with you, where you were saying before it started, Dan did a survey on Facebook where a lot of artists or people in the industry showed frustration for how it was working. So do you think that Side Door facilitated, like you were saying before, the middle ground for artists of that size?
Yeah, I think that, one of the main things that I saw getting into the industry and Dan's side from the artist side was that there's this sort of like rush to get to the top, and there's really no path for the middle class, if you will, which is the vast majority of artists out there. And so, we really saw that there was an opportunity to earn a reasonable amount of money at a show, and for the artists to have low overhead at these shows so that they could keep most of the money. And, the biggest thing is that, you know, we kind of grew with the people that we met as we were creating these shows. So there was different things of like, okay, so how do we, introduce people to new people? So we started doing this matchmaking between artists and hosts, and how do we make sure that the hosts are going to be a good fit, and how do we educate the hosts to be good hosts and promoters? And all of that is a learning curve. But I think what we got to was a degree of trust with the users, that they understood that, our vision and our mission was always to sort of make the music industry a little more democratic, a little more fair, a little more transparent, because there's a lot of gatekeeping, a lot of, you got to know somebody, you sort of have to play by the rules. And I think Dan and I very much are like, okay, let's learn the rules and figure out how to make them a little better for everyone.
Definitely. So we're going to pivot into COVID and online shows in a second. But before COVID hit, how did you see your business scaling? I know I read another article you're talking about going into America. Did that ever end up panning out?
Yeah, I mean, we after, we did a formal 1.0 launch in 2019, and then our 2020 plan was to break into the US, and that was largely built around a partnership with South by Southwest. So we had booked artists their own tours from their hometowns down to Austin, because anybody knows that trip, it's usually a money loss. It's hard to make any noise. And so we wanted to have a coming out party in the US that really showed to artists that, this is what we want to do, is we want to help artists sort of gain new places to play and new audiences and put money in their pocket before some of these big events. And so that was just a project that we worked on for 6 months, and, put a lot of time and effort and money into. And then, that week when everybody was speculating, or is it going to cancel or not? And then it did, and we canceled, just dozens of shows. And I would say we probably got 70% of the way there in terms of scaling, because we did a huge recruitment effort, and we did a lot of publicity. We got into Billboard magazine. There was a lot of traction that we did in the lead up, and we didn't get to the tour part, which was unfortunate. We didn't get to go to Austin, but the plan for scale was there, in this sort of virality that we can gain from, working one show at a time, one artist at a time. Then those people are all telling their own audiences and, their own fans.
Definitely. So going into COVID now, how has it been transitioning into the online shows? How was that pivot, and how has it been going so far?
Well, I mean, I should preface it to say that, we had one thing in our show booking flow that basically was like, you can choose if you want to have video or photo at your shows. We were very protective of people with their spaces. And so the idea of recording and broadcasting shows was far from our initial intentions. But Dan and I worked coast to coast for years. He's in Vancouver, I'm in Halifax. And so we had been using Zoom constantly as a team. And so while we knew it was definitely not the best place for sound, we knew that it was great for interaction. And our whole thing is like how to connect over live performance. And so for us, seeing the audience and the audience seeing each other was a big thing. So basically what happened was Dan was on tour. He had multiple sold out shows in Canada. We had been canceling all the South by shows. And about a week after, 10 days after that, we had sort of crawled out of the fetal position and put on, our first show on Zoom. And that was Dan, of course, being a guinea pig again. And I remember just calling him afterwards and with tears in my eyes, because I had watched the audience, and I'd been an audience member in the way that I remember feeling like in person. Like I felt really connected to people, and that was so needed at that time when everybody was wondering what was going to happen and how we were going to manage, isolation and that sort of thing. So we have done now 350 shows online, mostly through Zoom, but also through other platforms. And it's a brand new experience, of course, and it's really hard for us to, imagine being in this place 6 months ago. But, we've also seen ticket sales grow 3,000% from February to May. We've seen people who are, have accessibility issues being able to now attend these shows. We've seen a more diverse, group of artists coming to us and being able to perform. People from all over the world, from South Africa, from France, the UK. And so in a way, we've been able to really fulfill a lot of our mandate to serve and deliver revenue to artists in a way that we haven't been able to before.
That's really interesting. I guess it also increases accessibility too, because it doesn't matter what city you live in, it doesn't matter how far you are from a venue, anyone can attend now, which is
Exactly.
interesting. I hadn't thought of that. So what do you think makes an online Zoom show successful? What are the different elements that make it work?
Well, we, have tried to really nail this down in terms of, working with people that we know and getting lots of feedback from people before and after the show. And so what we found is we really think it's crucial to treat it like a real show. Know that you still have to promote, you still have to make it its own thing, you still have to prepare, you have to think about a lineup. We also think it's really important to be working with somebody. So whether or not it's us that can help match you with somebody who knows a little bit about the tech side of things, or a moderator who can manage the chat, or like if you have a waiting room or anything like that set up, it's always better to have somebody else who's managing those controls than yourself, because there's a lot of nerves. Like you turn on the camera and there you are, and your audience is right there looking back at you. So we've really started to dig into the pre-show, sound check, tech tips, all of those things ahead of time, so that people, when they turn on the camera, they feel as prepared as possible. And I wouldn't say we're absolutely there yet. We're still experiencing some, feelings from the audience and the artists of like, I'm not sure what to expect and I'm not sure what to do. But it's also a function of like, this is a relatively new thing that many people haven't experienced before. And so it does take time to learn and educate. But the feedback afterwards has been phenomenal when we get it right. Like if we really do a good job of setting up the artist and setting up the audience, then they come away and people have said, it's like a religious experience. And, an artist told me the other day it was like God's work. And like, I'm not a religious person at all, and it's been just really interesting to hear these kinds of comments coming up. But I think the thing is that in a time when there's a lot of uncertainty, when you find something that works and that feels good, it's really important.
That's interesting. And have you seen anything really cool that an artist has done to really stand out in these live performances, or any tips you can offer to any artists who maybe want to try them out?
Yeah, I think, the more interaction with the audience you can give, the better. It really is valuable to do question and answer, to solicit stories beforehand. And like I say, have somebody to help you, spotlight those people and let them speak with you if you're comfortable with that. Other people who are not so comfortable with the interactive element, I've seen them insert different things, like they'll play a new music video, they'll premiere a new music video in the middle of it. They'll really work hard on the setup, so they'll have all the great lighting, they'll have really beautiful sort of surroundings. We have a zine on our website, and so we kind of cover a lot of what the community is doing, and so we have lots of articles referring to like, with these kinds of setups and what people are doing, what they're wearing, and how they're trying to do that. So it's been really amazing to not only be able to attend these shows and see what they're doing, but for people to be able to share with one another and learn from each other. Even the artists are starting to help co-host each other's shows and guest star and show up and do a song or two at other people's shows, and that's been really amazing. it's a delightful experience when you're in an audience and suddenly something you don't expect is happening. Like Dan had Veda Hilly show up in his basement window just off camera, and then suddenly there's another camera pointing at her, and they're singing together. This is when physical distancing was still happening, and they're singing together and in harmony through the window, and it was spectacular.
That's so cool. That's really cool. So now that we are a few months into COVID and it's kind of the new reality, how do you see Side Door scaling now?
So we were built as a marketplace, a place where people can come and find each other and learn about each other, discover new artists. And the audience is in there now. Audiences have their own login where they can be part of it. And what we really want to work on is ensuring that the venues and presenters who are working right now to figure out what's next, is that we're doing a lot of work with them to allow for them to come into a show, help promote, get cut into the split, and so we're doing a lot of those kinds of introductions. So venues, it's a really hard time for anyone who has a lease, who has a bricks and mortar place to keep afloat. And so it's been really great work to set up an artist maybe in an empty theater, but then sell online tickets, and then do a hybrid show where there's maybe a 30% filled space, and then you have online tickets. And so we've been doing a lot more work in that area, and ensuring that it's safe, doing sort of a lot of vetting with the hosts to ensure that they're doing the right thing, giving the audience enough information so that they can make good choices. In the future, within a year, I think that we're going to really see who's survived in terms of spaces, and I think there's going to be a massive demand on the existing spaces, whatever's left. And so we still have a whole pile of hosts who have alternative spaces. These are like anything from homes to community spaces, breweries, barns, anything you can imagine. But because their primary purpose has not been to be a music venue, the likelihood of their survival is a lot greater. And so we want to keep engaging those folks so that when the time comes that people can tour again, that we have those spaces available, that we have those relationships built so that people can get out there and enjoy shows as soon as they can and as safely as they can.
Definitely. That's really interesting. How do you approach international development?
So it's interesting. We were working to move into the US. That was, going as expected. It was plotting, and, from Canada, it's always sort of like, I worked in Los Angeles for 4 months before, and right before we started this company. And it was a full understanding that it doesn't really matter what happens outside of the US while I was there. So, it was an interesting task to try to break into that market. But now what I'm seeing is, because it's online, there's a lot fewer barriers to entry. And so right away, we were being contacted by presenters and promoters and artists from all over the world, because we are relatively early out of the gate with this kind of offering. And so, it kind of there was phone calls with amazing folks who are just like, what are you doing? What can you do? And we learned from those conversations how to build what we did. And that earned us really great shows in places that we would not have been able to reach before, the pandemic hit. So the accessibility, again, to reach international markets is great. And not only that, but we're seeing a lot of, our base is largely Canadian, but a lot of Canadian artists who have fans elsewhere. And those fans have never seen those artists play live. And now they're able to interact with them and tell them stories and really relate to them in a way that is very special. And so we're moving into more geo-gating so that people can virtually tour if necessary. And I think that's going to really help to, increase the possibility of going to some of these places where you may have popularity, but you may not have the ability to get there. And vice versa. Like, we're seeing some real popularity of, people who are in lockdown who can't go out at all, but they're looking for this kind of entertainment. So, growing audiences in different markets that, again, would never have seen in person this soon. So it's definitely an easier way to grow your international market, as people just adopt this as a thing that they do.
Yeah. So when you talk about virtually touring, how does that work? Because I guess doing a live show, anyone from any city can join. So when you do the virtual touring, do you try to restrict it to different cities, or I guess time zones play into that as well?
Yeah, both of those things. Largely, it's sort of like, I mean, if anybody in Canada can relate to this, it's like when you try to watch Saturday Night Live and NBC says, no, you can't watch this, it's restricted. It's that kind of experience. We're going to try to do it in a much more friendly way. But if the show creator, the artist, or the promoter decides this show is only going to be for people in Northeast and Eastern US, we can basically draw a circle around the area and say those are the folks that are going to be able to watch the show. It will be promoted in that area and shown in that area, and then they can move on to a different area. And that just helps to keep, from oversaturating. So that means that you could do a show a week without, saying, okay, well, I'm on Facebook, when people are doing it right now, they're like, I'm playing a weekly show. Well, they're seeing their numbers diminish over and over again because, what's making it different, what's making it special, what's making it scarce, so this is a way for artists who can do that.
That's really cool. And do you know if anyone's actually attempted that concept yet, or is it still on the horizon?
Yeah, we had a great artist who basically did a virtual tour. We didn't have the technology in place yet, but she essentially did it by, the promotion and Facebook geo targeting, and she used that methodology, and she partnered with venues in various states. And she essentially did a Pride tour during Pride Month and toured these various cities and partnered with the various venues. And that was great. It was, I think it would have helped to have the technology in place because you do still see all those shows. So we want to ensure that there's some scarcity there so that the artist, it feels special for each audience to attend those shows.
Definitely, that's really cool. I'm excited to look into that more after this. What's one thing that you think other industries are doing that the music industry isn't but should be?
Well, it's interesting because I think generally the consumer hasn't had a lot of agency. The fan hasn't ever had a lot of agency in the music industry. You think about, massive ticket fees for what, and limited access. And, unless you're a credit card holder for some shows, I really am interested in rewarding fans for being great fans. And, we have sort of a motto of using the carrot rather than the stick at Side Door and sort of rewarding good behavior. And I really want to do that with, starting with the audience by saying, if you're leaving great reviews and attending lots of shows and sharing lots of tickets with your friends, these are the promoters that we all know in each of our cities. They just don't get paid for what they do. They don't get rewarded for what they do. And we want to start recognizing them and giving some better access to folks. And the thing about that too is that you don't have to have any special status other than, loving music and doing what you do. So I really think we can learn from other industries where they champion the people who are actually paying for the thing. They're paying for the tickets. And really giving them some more agency so that they can play a role. The other thing that we're doing is enabling for ways to actually get involved with the shows. So we're working on a program to educate people on how to be a moderator or a co-host on these shows, so they can do a program with us and essentially be certified to run a program. We do mentorships with other people who are doing this, and this is a job. Like, you can have a freelance side job working that kind of thing, and we're really seeing that happening with some of the hosting gigs as well. It's hard times right now, and the music industry has lost a ton of jobs, and as we have in lots of industries, but there are new roles coming up, and I really believe that if we can sort of identify what those valuable positions are, we can sort of help audience members, get trained and understand how to help and get some money and get paid on the side. I think it's a really exciting way to partake in a show.
And who has inspired you the most, career-wise or personally?
Well, I would say career-wise, I look to Katarina Fake, who actually helped found Flickr and some other platform businesses. And her attitude towards technology businesses is always centered around fairness and transparency and democracy, and just really understanding that it's not about the dollars. It's about, what technology can do to be just more helpful in people's lives. And, I'm not a serial entrepreneur, really. I'm in it because I care that we can kind of do this a little bit differently. And so I look to her, and she's done things with, she helped start Etsy, and she's worked on other projects that are pretty admirable, especially at the starting phase, for helping creators. I also looked to Yvon Chouinard, who was the founder of Patagonia. His whole philosophy was a purpose-led business, and so never to lose faith in the reason that you started your business. Like, it's always going to be your gut feeling that's going to lead you in the right direction. And I think we're seeing that right now. The big corporations that are in business right now, they're under immense scrutiny because I think they've lost sight of what the purpose was of building that business. And so I think it's a hard line for me to say as a corporation, like, oh, we're going to be better than them. It's, I don't want to throw stones in glass houses here, but at the same time, I think there's really intentional ways you can create business without being the bad guy. And yeah, just personally, my mom was an entrepreneur. I worked for her since I was 13. It's kind of in my blood yeah.
Nice. I love that. So what is your biggest accomplishment to date?
I would say my biggest accomplishment to date probably has been developing the team that we have. I haven't been a boss before, but I always felt like, managing a team would be hard, and I didn't really know how to do it. And I think the response that I get from the team is that they feel good being, working with us. And that's my measure at the end of the day. And I love being a part of a team. I love, rallying them. I love, getting ideas from them. I love figuring out what leadership looks like when it's not a top-down sort of way, but a collective sort of innovative way of running things. I take a lot of instruction from Anne-Marie Brown, Adrienne Marie Brown, sorry. I think I got her name wrong. From Adrienne Marie Brown, who she wrote Emergent Strategy, and just it was revolutionary to me to just think about how to lead people without being an asshole, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's important. That's great. Well, perfect. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and I loved everything you had to say about the virtual stuff. I'm so excited to look more into everything you said.
Yeah, well, thank you, Allison. I really appreciate your time.
And thank you so much to everyone who watched. Our next episode will be up in a few weeks, so keep an eye out. Thanks.